Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome in, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I just wanted to welcome you all to tonight's Bridges Beyond Bars Live. So this episode is titled The Ripple Effect. I'm Kirsten, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm your host for this evening and also president of Bridges Beyond Bars. It's an honor to be with you all as we create space tonight for reflection, truth-telling, and healing.
And I'm Sarah Moore, your co-host for this evening. And for you, those who don't know me, I am a proud mom, Omi, which my grandson calls me. I am a longtime advocate for justice, family restoration, and rehabilitation. My own journey began a little over 7 years ago when I met my husband, Vega, and became deeply invested in the fight of freedom, not just for the ones behind the walls, but for all of us who wait, grieve, support, and survive on the outside.
So tonight's live is all about the ripple effect, obviously, as the name suggests. So this is the impact that mass incarceration has on the people left behind. We often hear about those who are locked up and in prison and jails, and while their stories do matter deeply, tonight we're focusing on the mothers, daughters, sisters, partners, husbands, wives, the families, and the communities who carry their own version of the sentence.
And it's not always visible, but the trauma, the grief, the financial stress, the emotional toll, it ripples. It shapes childhoods, breaks routines, burdens families, and for some, it becomes a lifelong wound that never fully heals.
So we want to thank you, of course, all for being here tonight. This is a safe place. So please do share your thoughts if and when you feel ready. Use the comments to tell us where you're watching from, whether you're someone who has been impacted by the criminal justice system or just here to learn. If you could also share out the live. Obviously, people can watch this recorded as well, but we encourage conversation, connection, and compassion in the chat.
And we also want to extend a very special thank you to our incredible guests tonight, Christina Sanchez, Keira Moore, and Sonia Sykes. Thank you for showing up, for being open, vulnerable with us, and giving your whole selves tonight to this experience. Your voices matter.
And as you listen tonight, if there are questions you don't feel comfortable posting publicly, or if something hits home and you'd rather talk privately, you can reach out to myself or Sarah or any of our guests after the live. We are here for you.
And one more important note, this conversation comes with a trigger warning. We will be discussing topics related to mental health, sentencing, trauma, and grief. If at times you feel overwhelmed, please take a step back. And if you or someone you know needs additional support, we strongly encourage you to reach out to a licensed mental health professional.
All right, so let's dive in. Tonight's conversation is about the ripple effect, how incarceration impacts the lives of those left behind, and we are so honored to have three powerful women with us here to share their stories and reflections.
And before we get into the discussion, we want to give each of our guests a moment to introduce themselves. Please share your name, how you've how you're connected to the criminal justice system, and how you found your way to being here tonight.
So we're going to start with Christina Sanchez. Hi, Christina.
Hi,
Hello.
Christina.
Hey, ladies.
Welcome
Thank you
in.
so much for having us here tonight.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can let us know. Obviously, you've got people in here that do know who you are. A lot of us know who you are. But if you can kind of share with those that don't know who you are, your connection to the criminal justice system and a little bit about you.
Absolutely. Well, my name is Christina Sanchez. My journey began about 14 years ago. My husband was sentenced to life without parole as a juvenile. It's been a long journey, and to be honest, I wouldn't wish this on anyone. But we take each day, day by day, and we conquer what we can. day by day. Through the 14 years, he has accomplished so much. I can't even begin to explain or put in detail how much he's accomplished. I'm so very proud of him. Most recently, I have taken over the position as advocate director of Virginia Coalition for the Fair Sentence of Youth, which is, thank you. It's a sister kind of organization under the National Organization of Campaign for the Fair Sentence of Youth. So, I mean, what we're doing, our priority right now is we're working on a meaningful parole opportunity for juveniles. So that's our biggest thing right now. Juveniles should not be sentenced to life without parole. And I think from the beginning, mandatory sentencing was the biggest issue. But we'll get into that later on.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your vulnerability. I am going to bring up our next guest, Sonia. Welcome in. Welcome in. Thank you for joining us. You are muted, so make sure you unmute.
Hello.
Hello. Do you want to give us a little bit about you, your involvement in the criminal justice system, and who you are for those of you who don't know who you are?
Okay, so my name is Sonia Sykes. I am involved. I got involved in the criminal justice system 19 years ago when my son was sentenced for first-degree murder, life without parole in, of course, Virginia. I also work now with returning citizens in reentry houses. It's been a long, hard road, but we'll talk about that later. About all the things that I've been through on this journey. I'm just happy that Kirsten and Sarah, that you guys are having us on to talk about our story. People, we're the forgotten people, the moms, the wives, the sisters, the children. So thank you for having us, and we'll talk later.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Sarah, do you want to introduce our next guest, and I'll bring her up?
Yes. So our next guest is Keira Moore.
Welcome in.
Hey,
Hi.
good evening.
Hello.
Hi.
Would you like to introduce yourself for the people?
Yes. So my name is Keira Moore. I'm a mother advocate, survivor of the system myself. So my story, a short story. I was born into the cycle of incarceration. My father was incarcerated. My brother was incarcerated, and eventually I was too. Also, during my incarceration, I gave birth to my only child, my daughter, while in prison. And that moment changed everything for me. So today, I use my story to empower others through reentry, recovery, and advocacy work. So I'm here tonight to speak from lived experiences, break the cycle, and remind folks that healing is possible even after the system tries to break you.
That's right.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. You've already given us so much just by showing up and sharing that part of your story.
Absolutely. So we want to begin tonight's discussion with something that often goes unseen, mental and emotional health. When someone you love is incarcerated, it's not just them doing time. You're carrying a lot too. So first off, I guess, how has incarceration impacted your mental and emotional well-being? And Sarah, if you want to have any questions with regards to that as well.
Yeah. And in those hardest moments, did you have tools to cope? Were you expected to stay strong, to hold it all in? Let's talk about how you've navigated those emotional ups and downs.
Christina, did you want to start us off?
Sure. As far as mental and emotional health, my life has been survival mode. 100%. 100%. I guess the biggest thing as far as, having a loved one incarcerated for me was my children and seeing the emotional impact it had on my children, especially at the young age when we started visitation and, we just the visitation process. I mean, I think we all know that that is horrendous. Even, for us, much less a child. Now, my children were, I believe, how old were they? 7 and 10 when my husband and I reunited and we started visiting him. And that was huge for them. That was really big. And we started our process at Sussex 2. If anybody knows anything about Sussex 2, you know how that is. And they were awesome. They went through it, and he loved visiting with them, and just getting to see him, and then I remember, like, at the end of one visit, my son was like, "Can we just put him in our pocket and take him home?" Oh, that broke my heart. But there would be nights, there would be days and nights that when my kids would be like, "Well, if Dad was home, we could be doing this," or my daughter, she had wrote a poem back in 2014, I think it was. And I meant to share it so we could share it tonight, but I forgot. I'm sorry. But it was just very inspirational from, just like a daughter, and he's not even the biological father, but he's the father that stepped up. He is their father figure. He is whom they know as their father. And it was just very inspirational from a, daughter daddy thing, bond. But just having to leave him here, and then I know there were times where, my visits were suspended because the CO just purely didn't like me. So that hit me hard. Then it brings on anxiety, depression. And still to this day, I have depression. It's just, like I said, my husband was sentenced as a juvenile to life without parole, and now it's unconstitutional, and they're eligible for parole, every year.
Right.
But it's just year after year after year, just being denied, and it takes a toll on you. But you just keep fighting and fight, a different fight every day, honestly.
Yeah, I get it. Thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable. It's not an easy conversation. I don't think there's going to be a dry eye in the house after tonight, to be honest. Oh, goodness me, Christina. I guess Sonia and Keira, did anything come up for you? And I really want this to be like a roundtable discussion. Like if you have something to add on top of that or a differing perspective, I want you to feel comfortable to jump in and, offer just a different aspect or a similar sort of share whenever you feel comfortable. Are either of you happy to talk on that?
Really quick, Kirsten, before we move from that, just because I can relate to Christina with the juvenile parole, and I get you. That fight, that battle, that year after year of the high hope to the hitting bottom of the letdown. It's an emotional roller coaster constantly, right?
It definitely is.
You're going up and you're preparing for the fight. You're preparing to put everything that they've accomplished and their support system, their family support, what they have to work for when they come out and look forward to putting all that together and like, okay, we got it. I think it's going to be great this year. We have a high chance and a high hope to that letdown. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
my question for you would be, how do you cope with that yourself? But also, how do you show that strength to him, knowing that, you know, the emotions we go through, they're going through it too, right? So how do you balance the two?
Well, for one, my husband's very strong, and he never gets his hopes too high. But to reply to, you know, what you were saying, like, you know, the parole board members, they don't personally meet with the parolees. They send an interviewer, and that interviewer gets their hopes so high, and then they're just let down. Like, it's like deny, deny, deny. And in our case, we need 4 votes, so you get 3, you're out of the game.
Right.
But I mean, we just look, I mean, as far as what I do afterwards, I find something else to put my teeth into, and another bill to pass, another bill to draft, and keep on going.
Yeah, right.
Definitely. Keira, did you want to weigh in on the emotional and mental part of your experience?
So the emotional mental part for me, like my initial experience would be that of a child who had a parent who was incarcerated, right? So that's where it started at for me. And just because of the environment that I was in as a child and like some of the trauma and things that were going on in our household, like I was dealing with so much resentment towards my father for not being there, you know? So there would be times that, you know, I could just be going through something as a teenager, you know, because, you know, women and girls as teenagers, our journey is completely different than boys. So we go through a lot of different emotions and really just trying to find ourselves and find our way. So there would be times I could be going through things and just really trying to process and understand why my childhood had to be the way that it was. And he could call home from prison and I would just take it out on him, right? With no understanding of what he was going through, like the struggle that he had to deal with mentally every day being incarcerated and, you know, having been in there for decades and having missed out on his children's life. And so it wasn't until I was older and made some of the same mistakes and some of my own mistakes that I really gained a better understanding and respect for him in his journey. But as a child, it was very, very difficult for me, very difficult for me. And then, you know, past my father, having my older brother, who was like a father figure to me, to then becoming incarcerated in my teenage years and having him go through that. It was just like, you know, I felt like the universe kept dealing me blow after blow, like, you know, how much is enough? And then eventually, like I said, becoming incarcerated myself. And then when you make your own mistakes, you really just learn to look at things from a different perspective. But as an adult now dealing with it with the level of maturity and understanding that I have, you just have to lean on your village. You know, you just have to have that good support system, those people who speak life into you, the people who remind you of who you are every day. And like, you know, God puts some of his toughest tests on his biggest soldiers, right? You know, he's not going to put anything on us that we can't handle. I know that sounds so cliche. And sometimes we feel like, okay, God, how much more can we handle? But you just have to keep reminding yourself of who you are and those positive affirmations and making sure that you're surrounding yourself around people who are, you know, on this journey with you and can encourage you on the way. So that would be, you know, my pointers on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Sonia, I guess as a mother, what the emotional and mental toll on you?
Yeah, it's been a journey. depression definitely for the last 19 years. I didn't even realize it um until I started doing this. Like I just been going, just been going like uh just existing. Just that's it. That's all. My son uh was burned at Sussex too in the kitchen. 80% of his body, inmate boiled some water, 160-degree water, added ammonia to it and threw it on him. So it's been the depression, the visits, his children. He has 4 children. Watching, taking them, like you said, taking them to the institutions and having those babies stripped down. It's just been a lot. It's just been a lot. So being able to talk about it is good. It's good. It helps. It doesn't lessen the hurt or the heartache, because going to see your child, well, when he was burned at Sussex too, couldn't get any information. They wouldn't let me visit. I had to get it approved. I had to go to a captain to go see my child, and not being able to touch him and not be able to hug him, and not. It's an emotional toll that I wouldn't wish on anybody. So yeah, it's been a rough one, and we got a long road. We have a long road, because that life without parole, that's a horrible sentence. But I also want to say that I am able to visit my son. I want to say for the victim, his family can't see him, and my heart goes out to that family too. But I think they people need to know that we hurt too. We do the time too. We really do.
I agree. Thank you so much for sharing. And again, keep in mind the triggers for tonight. There are going to be some really heavy topics that are spoken about. And Sonia, I just want to thank you for sharing that incredibly private and vulnerable part of your story and your son's story. I want to move into something, I guess, that's kind of just a tie on to that, that's closely tied, self-care. So when you're supporting someone who's incarcerated, it can feel impossible to prioritize yourself. But we know that self-care is critical.
And what does self-care look like for you, if you've been able to practice it? And what advice would you give someone who's still learning how to care for themselves in the middle of everything else?
Keira, do you want to go ahead and start this one for us?
Yeah, so I'll chime in on that. For me, self-care wasn't something that I grew up hearing about. Like Christina mentioned earlier, I was in survival mode, fight or flight mode, and that's how I was for years. So it wasn't self-nurturing. But after incarceration, I had to relearn how to take care of myself beyond just getting through every day and just getting by. Growing up, it was like self-care was a luxury. Like, who had massages or pedicures or just took a day out or just unplugged from the world. So now for me, it's a necessity. I will just be completely transparent. Doing this advocacy work, it can be draining at times, right? So then I feel like incarceration is just part of my journey on so many different levels, because you go through being affected by, family, then myself, and now here I advocate for people every day. So, I mean, what it looks like for me now is I just have to create boundaries, like rest without guilt, making sure that I'm staying prayed up. Like I mentioned earlier, making sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who speak life into you, daily, and just encourage you and remind you of who you are, because healing it isn't pretty. It isn't pretty. It's a process. And even, some of the guys that I advocate for now, I have one of my juvenile life without parole clients, right? He's a gentleman that I've been advocating for years. He's so excited, right? He's going up for parole for the first time in June. He's been down since he was 17 for 20 years. So he's so pumped and excited, and he has all these things going on. But sometimes he will call me 4 or 5 times in a day. And I'm like, listen, you can't do this. I have so many different things going on. So you do have to set those boundaries. You have to take that time out. Even if it weren't someone I was advocating for, I still have loved ones who are incarcerated. But what good am I to everybody else if I'm no good for myself? Like if Kiera isn't at 100%, then I have nothing to give. You can't pour from an empty cup. So we have to remind ourselves, and if you have to unplug and just cut yourself off for 24 hours so you can regroup, or however long you need, like, don't feel guilty about it. I just encourage everyone to do just that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And what about you, Sonia? What do you do for self-care? And what advice do you give?
I don't even know what self-care looks like. I really don't. I'm going to take some advice from Kiera. For a while, the only thing I knew was to go visit the prison and wait for the phone call, and that's for a long time. So I don't know what self-care looks like. Sometimes I travel, but then even when I'm traveling, that's all based on visits, or being by the phone. Everything. Everything has been about this sentence for me. So I'm going to take some advice, Kiera. I thank you for what you said.
Please
It's
do.
almost like when I watched you say that out loud just then, and it was like you just realized how that sounded when it came out of your mouth. It was like I just base my entire day around whether I can be there for that phone call. If I'm going to go on vacation, I need to make sure that it's somewhere that has service, or I can be back in time for that weekend visit. And I think it's that, like, how much are you really making it all, like you have to live for you too. Like, and I think that's the key, right? And I'm sure that your son wants you to live for you as well. Yeah, it is. Christina, how about you? Self-care.
I have to second Sonia. I work, I advocate, and that's pretty much it. I do go on annual retreats with the Campaign for the Fair Sensitive Youth for self-care purposes, because they are very big on that, in which I applaud them for that. And I enjoy my time there. I really do. But that's, I don't know, that's about all the time I got.
When you're on that retreat, do you still answer phone calls?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm not gonna miss a phone call.
I'm just gonna leave that there. I don't need to say any more, Christina. Someone in the comments said, Sonia, your hair looks great. So I would say that has something to do with self-care. It doesn't even have to be something big and extravagant, right?
I'm gonna take care of me a little bit.
Yeah, go get your nails done. Go get your hair done. Read a book. Sit down with a good book for if you know that they're on lockdown or on count, sit down with a book, have a bath, binge your favorite TV show. It doesn't have to be something big and extravagant. It can be those little acts of self-care where you just look after you. And I think that that's so important, because otherwise we do lose our own identity,
Yeah. And that's what I was about to say too, is, the little bits of self-care that you can do to help balance out you and what you deal with daily with the system. I mean, as far as just, shutting down the world for a little bit, put it on your favorite music track and sipping some wine, or if you like liquor or whatever, whatever, just to kind of relax yourself. My go-to is Crown Royal, Apple. So, I'll put on music and it shut down TV and just sip and be in my own element. To me, music is a universal language, right? And it depending on what you listen to, it can soothe your soul, So that's my go-to. Like when I'm having a hard day or it's been rough, I'll go get me a little apple crown, maybe some wine, turn on the music, and just kind of like decompress in a way on certain things. Other times go get my nails done, my feet done. I might do it twice, nail and feet in the same day. That's my lucky day where I can sit in that chair for a few hours and get pampered, you know. But those little things really do matter, right? We don't see it as self-care a lot when we're going to get our nails done or our feet done. We just think, oh, this is just something that's costing us money that we may not really have to spend, but you spend it on yourself and you spend it on the care for you and the way you like to look and you like to feel. I don't know anybody that doesn't like a nice hot rock foot massage from the nail place, you know? So, you know, it's just the little things that count, you know. Meditation, you know, you're into, you know, depending on your spirituality and your religion, going to church services, you know. It's so many little things you can do that you can take 10 to 15, not even that, 5 minutes out your day just to breathe. If it's all you're doing is just taking those deep breaths and doing those counting regimens with the breathing, I mean, do that. I mean, my family, my husband including my mother-in-law, always tell me I can't sit down. I'm always doing something. I don't know how to just sit down and relax and just do me. And that worries them too, right? Because if we're on go mode all the time, how are we going to be there for anybody, including ourselves, if we shut down? Mm-hmm. We can't. So you have to really take those moments to yourself. And do not, I want to tell y'all this. Okay. Do not feel guilty for taking time for yourself. Yeah. You all deserve that time. I have to tell myself that too all the time. It's one of my affirmations. You know, don't feel guilty. You are not guilty of taking time to yourself. Yeah. Okay. Just remember that. Yeah. Okay. So Sonia and Christina, I want y'all to forward. Take 5 minutes of self-care at least.
We need reports.
I will.
Right.
We're keeping the group chat open, and we want you to make sure that you're reporting back at the end of each week what you've done for yourself. And I think here, like, obviously, I'm an advocate. I speak to a lot of people every day. And I find myself in that situation. Like, I'll work, and because it is such an emotional role, I take on a lot of emotion of what's going on for people and what they're going through, even people out here, loved ones, people inside. And I'm guilty of it too, right? Like, and I'm getting better at switching off and saying no and just not answering the phone. But there has been times where my body has just gone, no more. Mm-hmm. Like, you have had enough, man. Like, you just need to stop. And I will sleep for like a good 12 hours and Sarah thinks I'm dead, you know, and she'll be like, where are you? And I'm like, oh, my body just decided that it had had enough. So I'm getting better at it too. We can always get better at it. And especially as mothers, we're all mothers, right? And so that's outside of the incarceration thing. Mothers don't do enough for themselves. So I think, that's something that we can all get better at. Moving on, let's talk about the psychological toll this takes. So we did talk about it a little bit when we talked about it, mental and emotional, but I guess I want to go a little bit deeper on this. The constant worry, the helplessness, the grief, it stays with you, right?
And have you felt that? How has that shaped your thoughts, your daily life, your long-term mental health? And did you feel like people around you understood what you were going through?
Do you want to start us off, Sonia?
I hide a lot, so I don't think people really understand or see, you know, the depression or the sadness. You know, my maybe my mom, my daughter, but I hide a lot. So, I'm always gonna appear to be strong. Like I'm really falling to pieces right now. I just keep on crying. But yeah, I try to be strong, but it's definitely, and I think talking about it now is really taking a toll on me. I'm gonna step away in a minute and go in my corner, and then I'm gonna come back.
Absolutely. Take whatever time you
Yeah,
need.
but yeah, I just try to stay strong because I have to be strong for myself, my children, my grandchildren, and especially my son. I can't let him see me fall apart because then he falls apart. So it's just hard.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna come back.
Absolutely.
Take your time.
Go ahead.
All right, ladies. And how about you, Christina?
We can come back to you, Christina, if you like. We can go to Keira. Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Keira.
So wow, I guess this one does hit a little bit deep. For me, I kind of spoke earlier about what I dealt with, having a parent that was incarcerated. Um, and that just coupled like layered on some of the other things like, household things that were going on in my home. I'm trying to figure out how to word this right. So I'm sure you guys are all familiar with ACEs and, us just learning in society, it just becoming really relevant, probably within the last like 5 years or so. You're starting to learn about ACEs and childhood trauma. And now a lot of things are starting to make sense. Like we're starting to understand the why, the root cause of why things happened. But it was, growing up with a father that was incarcerated, it was emotionally taxing in so many different ways, just having that absent parent. And you would have thought that I wouldn't have created that same environment for my child. It's like, where did I go wrong? Where did I miss it? Where did it not affect me enough that I didn't want to hand that same thing down to my child? Right. But it's a lot. And I still think to this day, and my father passed away, unfortunately, passed away to cancer in 2016. And this was, let's see, he was released in 2009. I'm trying to do the calculations in my head. So not long after he was released from incarceration, he passed away from cancer. And I'm still processing that, still trying to deal with the emotional impact of feeling like the system literally just snatched my father away from me. Because just a little quick snippet, when my dad was incarcerated in federal prison, so he done federal time for 20 plus years, one of the jobs that he had within the system was he took care of the cancer patients at the Federal Medical Center in Butner, North Carolina. So my father would tell me stories of how, as an inmate, he was in charge of administering like cancer medication to some of the patients, things that he wasn't medically inclined to do, right? And they just, of course, we know how things happen within the facilities. And so he was exposed to different medicines and chemotherapy and all these other things. So I used to wonder, right? Years later, was he exposed to something in there that later led to him, getting cancer? Because he had stomach cancer and he was a vegetarian for 34 years. So there was like so many different conspiracy theories and things that went through my head. But I just felt still, like I said, even at the age that I am now and going through some of the things that that I've been through, I'm still unpacking that trauma and still trying to process and understand those things that happened to me as a child and not having my father out here in society, but for so many years before I lost him. So again, it's a process. It is. It's a process. Therapy, 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 therapy. Yeah.
Christina, do you feel okay to share, I am happy for you to skip this one if you need to.
Yeah, I'm going to skip this one, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. Sonia, are you ready to come back? You can just nod if you're ready. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
That's okay. That's okay.
Um,
Sarah, did you want to share on this one? On
yeah,
your
I'll, share just a little bit. Because it is this, like, it's hard to get your words right when you are, thinking deep down of really how it really does affect you in that psychological way. You know, a lot of things don't hit me about the absence of his presence. I mean, yeah, leaving the visitation room, to get through that, I would just say, next weekend, I'll see you next weekend. And I always had something to look forward to, right? Um, but sometimes it hits me when I'm not a crier, y'all, and it's gonna make me tear up. Oh my goodness. um, it's like when I sit and I'm watching movies or I'm watching things that are like real life events, or I am out in public and I see people, with their partner in life and the way they are, or, I see these TikTok reels of these husband and wife team, playing pranks on each other, having good times, taking their family out, and me, my little old self is sitting on the couch in the corner of my favorite part of the couch. And I look over and there's an empty seat. And that's what hits me. Whew. Okay, so that's what hits me the hardest. And I'm usually the strong one in my family.
Yeah. Take a minute.
But, a lot of them are watching, so they're going to see this rawness of me come out because they don't see it ever. Because I do hold it in. I hold the strength because me being a strong one, everybody gets their strength from me. They look up to me and they ask me, how do you deal with this? How do you compose yourself so well when things like this happen? So, but that's what hits, it's like when I see people out in public and they're hugging on their loved one and they got the kids and everybody's laughing and playing, I got to look the other way because it hurts. It hits deep. I got to just smile and look the other way and just keep going. I got to act like that part of the world don't exist right now, even though it does. That's the only way I can cope, But the reality of it is I come home to an empty house. I come home to not having him here. I come home to, not being able to plan for a vacation or the holidays with him. It's all done by over the phone and through video visits. I've always made it to where Christmas comes along, I have a video visit with him Christmas Day so I could turn the camera around and he could see everybody opening their gifts, or for his birthday, I'll put on a silly hat and, have a cupcake or a piece of cake with a candle and I'll sing happy birthday. Yeah, I'll sing happy birthday and tell him make a wish and then I'll blow out the candle for you. Or you could blow it out and I'll, just whatever makes him feel like being a part of home. It's the closest we can get, So that's the psychological toll that it has, So, and I've only been in this almost 8 years with my husband. I can imagine how mom feels. Not having her son for almost 30 years. We don't talk about that. We don't talk about how, my heart goes out to the victim. But when I see her every day, I see her as a victim of his choices. The mistake he made. what she missed out on. She missed out on him growing from a teenager to a man. She had to watch that all unfold from visits, phone calls, letters, emails. You know, she couldn't get pictures of him. He couldn't send pictures to her and say, hey, this is me now. Look what I'm doing. You know, it's such a huge toll. And a lot of people forget about that psychological impact it has on the family members. So
Yeah. Christina, I can pop you down if you want to be popped down.
I'm sorry.
No,
Also,
go ahead.
When you were talking about seeing people with their loved ones, or seeing, for me, I'm happy when people are released from incarceration, but I get kind of jealous because it's not my baby coming out. When they did the early release, or when they do these different policies and change and let folks out, then I get kind of bitter. I don't want to be that way, but sometimes I feel that way. Why not me?
Yeah. I think that's incredibly important, because I think there's going to be a lot of people that are watching tonight that have felt the same thing. And it's like, oh, I don't want to say that because that seems really selfish. But we're all waiting for the day that something happens that impacts our loved one, and when people do come home, it's like, yeah, I am happy for them, but like, when's my turn? When's his turn? Like, why them and why not us? Like, has he not done enough? And I think for me, like, I take a little bit of a different aspect. I had a loved one that was incarcerated, and I'm trying not to go into that too much, but there was a time where we were on the phone, and I remember we were just talking, and I was an advocate at this point, and I was on the phone to him talking, and all of a sudden I hear the dogs. And the dogs are like, da, 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 da. And I hear, get down, get down, get down. And the phone just drops. And I hear screaming and yelling. And I was on the phone listening to all of that for 3.5 minutes. And I didn't hear from him for 8 days after that. 8 days. And I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I was ringing the prison. The prison wasn't telling us anything. And I was like, what the hell's happened? And just the anxiety, the worry, and no one, like, I didn't have people that I could go to at that point in my journey. Christina, you okay for me to bring you back up? Just nod your head. Yeah. Okay. I didn't have people at that point. I couldn't go to people and be like, hey, my husband, he was on the phone and the dogs came, and they're going to look at me like I'm nuts. They're going to be like, what do you mean the dogs came? Right. And I remember him calling me after those 8 days, and I answered that phone so quickly, and I was like, are you okay? And he's like, babe, I'm fine. I'm in prison. What can happen to me? He used to say that all the time. I can't go anywhere. I can't do anything. I'm in prison. What can happen to me? I'm like, everything can happen to you. Right. And so, like, these things have really touched me, because it takes me back, but also as an advocate now, because it is like, you try and get about your day and do the things you have to do and show up for the people you have to show up for. But like Sarah said, there's always that person missing. It's like, you get invited to a wedding. I remember I got invited to a wedding, and you know what? Someone was like, oh, I won't put a +1 on yours. Right? Because they knew. Right? I was like, did you have to say that?
Right.
right.
Like, how insensitive. Like, everyone else got a +1. I won't. Like, you could have just left it and not said it. Christmas, birthdays, and then you might book a visit on Christmas and just hope that it goes through and nothing comes up and they don't get cancelled. Or, that the facility doesn't go on lockdown and you don't miss out, or if something happens during the day. Like, I remember there being emergencies and I can't just call. You want to hope that the email goes through in time, but you might have just gone through something and you need them to understand or need them to know, or you need them to call, and they get that email 4 days later.
Yeah.
4 days later, and you can't talk to them. And sometimes you don't want to cry on the phone to them and say, I miss you. Today was hard.
Right.
Because you are their escape from that place. And so if you're then
You
bringing
take them
them
away.
down, like you're like, well, I can't be the sad person on the phone because you're the one in prison. Right. And so it's like that guilt of feeling something. So yeah, I man, who knew that this was going to be like this?
Yeah. Oh.
Well, let's move on to something else that's, I think, a little less emotionally charged. I think we all need kind of a little bit of something. The financial side. Okay. Commissary, attorney fees, traveling for visits, phone calls, being the only income earner. It adds up fast.
It does. And what has that been like for you all? What kind of sacrifices have you made or had to make to stay connected? And how has that shaped your household or your financial stability?
So
Yes,
for
can we
me,
start-
I'm sorry.
Can we start
For
with
me,
Christina? No, you're fine.
for me, I've been blessed because I have my mother. She has really taken the reign on the financial part of it. She does whatever she can do for her grandson. He's had a couple friends that pitched in, but I haven't really been financially drained, and that's because I have my mother, who she's Gemma, and Gemma is gonna make sure that her grandson is totally taken care of. So I haven't had that issue, except for like when you go to visits. Like we had to go Wildlands Ridge and Red Onion, and we had to stay over, take the kids. You got to feed them and all of those things. But I've been blessed, and Hassan has been blessed with a wonderful Gemma.
Absolutely. Christina, how about you?
Well, I guess, just, the normal stuff like travel cost, because some people aren't fortunate enough to be close to their loved one. So, like right now, I'm about an hour and 45 minutes from him. So it's pretty much just gas money. But there's been times where we're about 4.5 hours away, and that's been a lot of gas money. And then, we've also had to pay, because my husband right now, he's a PRS, which is a peer recovery specialist, and which is pretty much he mentors addicts, substance use abusers, guys that have unfortunately fallen into taking substances and nearly dying to get into this program. He's at Greensville right now. He's in the Write Up program. I know, Sarah, you know a lot about that one. But then, we have phone stamps, commissary packages, all that, comes with incarceration, unfortunately, but
Right.
it is a must and they need it. For me personally, it's on the outside, it's the one income, which economy these days is nearly impossible to even survive. But somehow God has managed to get me this far. And there's just a lot that comes with it. There's a lot that comes with it.
Video visits. They
Yeah,
charge us for everything.
absolutely.
They do.
I'm surprised they
Yeah.
don't charge them for the air they breathe. To be
You
honest.
know? Oh, girl. Uh,
If they
I'm
can
sure
find a
some,
way.
if they could find a way, exactly. If
Mm-hmm.
they could find a way. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard, and I know there's a lot of things that I'm just not even thinking of. But after through the years, it's just you just do it and keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure he's good, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. Somebody in the chat did say holiday packs. Every quarter those come out.
Which
Uh,
I'm blessed because my mother-in-law, she takes care of that. And
mhm.
my mother-in-law is a blessing, period. But she makes sure he has that right on cue. So
Mhm.
most of the time, all of the time he gets one. But you know how they are. Well, we're out of this, we're out of that.
Yeah.
We'll refund your money 6 months later. Da-da-da-da.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm blessed too to have.
Facts. How about that? How about that? I want to talk about that. When they cancel a visit, they take the money straight away, but when they give it back, it takes a week.
Oh yeah.
Or more.
Mhm.
Or more.
Uh-huh.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But get this: if
And
they
you have to
cancel
call
it,
them in order to get your money. They don't just
100%.
refund it. You have to
Yeah.
call them
because I've had to do that
and
multiple
prove it.
times. Mm-hmm. They'd be like, the prison or the facility has not let us know they canceled the visits. Well, I got the email. It's canceled on your site. So,
Yep.
but yeah, it's they make you pay for everything. And I've been blessed to have a mother-in-law as well that and a father-in-law that help with that financial responsibility.
Absolutely.
And I've lost count how much debt I am with them and with them, just for their support, emotional, financial, everything that they can help, when it comes to helping around the house. I mean, everything, right? Because it's all financial. So it just, to have, even if it's a small support, it's a support. It's somebody you can go to that understands what you're going through, right?
Yeah.
What about
Kira,
you?
I wanted to ask Kira, can you do this from both perspectives, Kira? So like from someone on the outside and then someone on the inside, what it feels like having to ask, I guess.
Oh, geez, right. So for years I watched my grandmother do it for my father. My mother wasn't involved in the financial aspect with my father. They had separated when we were babies. But my grandmother, when I say this lady was a ride or die, I literally mean it. This woman would work 3 jobs. So she had like a regular 9 to 5 and a couple of side hustles. Granny was a go-getter. And she made sure that my father didn't want for anything the entire 20 some years that he was incarcerated. And I just remember being younger, she would be the one who would take us to visit him. I was 11 years old when I met my father for the first time, and it was in the visitation room at a federal correctional facility in Beckley, West Virginia. So that was just traumatizing in itself. It's almost like being in the visitation room at Wallens Ridge, right? So, but I remember her traveling and taking us to visit him, and she would be so tired from working all the time that we would have to wake her up because Granny would nod off behind the wheel trying to make it to visitation, but she was going to see her son, right? But I just, and again, you got to think, so my dad went into the federal system late 80s, early 90s. And this is when phone calls were like $20, $30 a phone call. Like phone calls were outrageous. And so she was paying for those and commissary and anything else that he needed. And, the federal system has always been more flexible than the state system. So their access to different types of things through commissary. So you could spend a whole lot more money in the Fed system than you can in the state. But then, in my teenage years, I watched my mother go through it with my brother, paying for attorneys, making sure he had commissary, making sure we were because they held him in the county jail for 2 years, waiting for him to become an adult to sentence him for his crimes, and making sure we're at the jail every weekend to visit him. And then for me, during my incarceration, like I felt so conflicted, right? Because here I have given birth to a child while I was in jail waiting to be sentenced by the feds. And so my daughter goes home with my mom 3 days after she's born. So I've given my mom, a responsibility of taking care of a brand new baby. And then, here she is. I felt horrible for even having to ask for commissary or anything, but I had to have it, right? Because you're not even going to get, if you're getting indigent, you're still not going to get what you need to get by. So I would just try to make sure that I didn't ask for what I didn't absolutely need. Because I already felt bad enough because like you're taking care of my child, you're having to buy diapers and all these other things for her. And so when I finally was sentenced and transferred to prison, I was in Hazleton, West Virginia. So almost in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I was like 8-9 hours from my family. And I remember telling my mom, and it was like probably the hardest thing I ever had to do aside from giving birth to my first child while incarcerated. But I remember saying, don't worry about bringing her to come see me.
Oh, goodness.
Because I didn't want to ask for anything else, right? I'm like, imagine me. Ooh, sorry, give me a second. But I'm like, imagine me asking my mom to bring my infant child like 8-9 hours away and sit in a visitation room with her all day long, then having to get a hotel, and because it's not a trip that you can do in like one day. So having to get a hotel and stay overnight and then having to drive back. And then she would have had to, bring someone with her to help her with the baby. So there was just so many things. So when I left county jail, I didn't lay my eyes on my child again until she was 2 years old. The only thing that I had of her was the photos that they would send of her to me while I was incarcerated. So she was a little bit over 2 when I entered into the halfway house, and I was there for 6 months before I got to come home. So that for me was probably the thing that really just changed the trajectory of my life altogether, But yeah, just, back to making it relevant to the topic, that financial burden is hard. It's hard on the family. And so as an advocate and, out here in society, I see sometimes, and I find issue with this, and you guys can give me feedback on what you think. But I have, been scrolling through comments or seeing certain posts sometimes of some of our returning citizens, right? And I'm always applauding and trying to encourage people and participate where I can. But what really bothers me and irks my whole spirit is when you hear some of these guys and girls say, you don't owe nobody nothing. You got this on your own, or you got yourself free. Like how could you even fix your face to say that, like, you don't owe anybody nothing? Like when they do this time, their family does this time with them. I could never fix my face to say like I didn't owe my mom the world for the sacrifice that she made for me, because she didn't have to raise my child, right? She didn't have to provide commissary. She didn't have to literally do that time with me, do that time with my brother, be there for my father. Like, and it's not saying that you got to be indebted to that person for the rest of your life, but you pay respect where it's due, right? Mm-hmm. Because again, like I said, we're incarcerated as well as our loved ones in a different way. Right. So that's my input on that particular one.
No, I agree. I think that's key. I hear it a lot too. And I think there's a fine line between throwing it in someone's face and knowing that it's appreciated. Because the reality is, and I'm sure we can all relate, is that people that can show up don't. Mm-hmm. And if it was more shared amongst the community, it wouldn't be such a burden on the people that do show up. And so, yes, those people that do support the person do more than they probably should have to, because there is no one else.
Exactly.
Right. And so we need to be very aware that, yes, people do choose not to support someone when they're incarcerated. And we choose. We're not being forced to do this. We make a choice every single day to get up and answer the phone, keep money on the phone, book visits, we make a choice. And so it's a thank you.
Right.
If you worked on, like I create petitions, I promote, I have people on here, right? And I'm very thankful that the people that I've had and I've been able to promote are very thankful and appreciative. But to turn around and say, well, I did all this by myself, it takes a village. Incarceration takes a village. There's one person doing the time physically, but there is a bunch, hundreds of people doing the time mentally and emotionally. So I think that's really important, because that's something that is hard. It's almost like, okay, well, now that you're out, everything for the last however long doesn't matter. It's hard. It is hard. Keira, while we've still got you, and again, questions will come through. If you don't feel comfortable with answering them, that's okay. Sarah, do you want to read that one?
Yeah. So the question came through and it said, do you feel having, excuse me, do you feel having your father incarcerated led you down the same path?
Yes. And beyond my father. So my grandfather, my mother's father, was incarcerated for a short period of time in Beaumont. So for me, it's a generational curse on my family, and our current generation is just now in a position to break that curse, right? And it's hard. But I do believe my father being incarcerated, my brother being incarcerated, definitely impacted me, being incarcerated. Now, it's kind of like a twofold thing, right? So straight out of high school, I went into college and was majoring in criminal justice. Because I'd been impacted by incarceration, via my family, I wanted to, be part of the change. I wanted to be someone who shared that perspective, but on the other side of the fence, because we need people like us as prosecutors. We need people like us as COs and all throughout the justice system to make it fair and equitable, right? So I started out that way. And then because of life's decisions, I made a decision to drop out of school, start hanging in the streets and, become a drug dealer. But that's because that lifestyle was glorified around me, right? People used to brag on who my father was, because my father was like a big time hustler in the streets. He had a reputation that lived on in the streets years after he was gone. I could show up in a city where nobody knew me and say that I was his daughter, and everybody was just like, oh, wow, their response. So as a kid, not having him physically there, and, being ashamed in certain ways, but then seeing him still be glorified for that lifestyle, it intrigued me. To just be honest, it intrigued me to a certain extent. And it is some of the reason why I got involved in the street life and later became a drug dealer and eventually, led to my own incarceration. So, I mean, in a nutshell, yes, it absolutely did.
We have another question here for you, and then we'll move on. So what do you feel like helped you get through your time?
Having to give birth to my child the way that I did literally broke my spirit in so many ways that I can't explain. But I was very arrogant and full of myself and a hothead. And, God knows what it's going to take to break us, right? And that is what broke me. And I just remember saying, like, it stops with me. And when I said it stops, that generational curse stops with me. Like, I have to give my daughter something different than what I have. I don't want my kid to have to grow up seeing me in a visitation room. I'm glad that she never made it there. You know, like the closest to visitation was through, you know, a jail window, having to see me there as an infant, and she'll never remember that. She actually, just probably in the last 3 or 4 years, is really learning about my life and my incarceration because she's old enough to understand now. So just me in my mind, I told myself, listen, I can't change what I have done, but I can start today and do something different. So I took complete advantage of that time while I was incarcerated. I started working in the administrator's office. I worked in our resource center at the federal prison, which was a hub that prepared women that were getting ready to release. So preparing their resume, getting them ready with interview clothes, just preparing them to go out the door. So I was in that mindset of getting ready to leave. I'm getting ready to go. I'm in preparation mode. Even as I'm helping them, I'm still reminding myself daily. And I knew I had to like get myself together, you know, because you have to go home and be a mom. My mom, she's going to take care of her while I'm gone, but she's not going to raise her for the rest of my life. And I didn't want her to. So I just allowed that to fuel me, you know, and prepare me mentally to get through that time. And since I've been home, I've hit the ground running and accomplished so many things beyond my wildest dreams. So yeah, just wanted to be a better person and to be a mom.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you.
We are like halfway through the live, and I just want to kind of thank everyone for interacting in the comments. It is a very hard conversation to be having. If we can just have everyone share out the live as well, and obviously make sure that we are sharing it with our communities and our networks. I don't think these conversations happen enough, and especially not on a public platform. They happen behind closed doors and in little group chats or singular chats. So this is an incredible experience and an individual that probably is not going to happen again for a very long time. I hope that we set the way for more of these conversations, but if you can share it out, take this time to even share it to one person that you think may benefit from listening in. Let's move now. I think it's a good segue from what you just spoke on, Keira. For those of you raising children or supporting children, so in your case, Sonia, like obviously your grandchildren and then your child as well, what has the impact been like on them? How do you explain incarceration to a child? What does it mean to show up in a visiting room? You know, Sarah, do you have anything to add?
Oh,
yeah. Sorry, it was like some interference coming in, and I didn't know if you were still talking, Kirsten. I'm sorry, but you know, and I want to just add to. I just want to thank you all, ladies, for being as vulnerable as you are, and as that you've been on this live. I really appreciate that. It's hard to be vulnerable in a public space, but I just want to know, how has this changed your family structure? Were others able to step in, or did it all fall on you? Let's talk about the long-term effects on family bonds, childhood, and parenting.
Let's start with Sonia.
So I don't think I ever explained to my grandchildren really what was going on. We just said we're going to visit your dad. Now they're adults, so they understand. And when they were young, my mother always said, let's take the kids because while they're young, because when they get to be adults, they're not gonna visit. They're gonna be on with their lives. So that happened. Like, you know, they moved on with their lives. They talk to their dad. They do video visits with their dad. Well, two of them do anyway. My his oldest child, she just has so much resentment. It's almost like she feels like he went on purpose to prison to leave her. And although I used to take her to visit him, then she just said, he's not my dad. I'm not gonna go visit him. And she just has a lot of hurt, you know, and so we deal with that. It's just been a difficult road in trying to explain to children that their father can't come to holidays or birthdays, and you showing up with a picture instead of the person. It's just, it's I just can't explain it. I can't explain it, and I can't explain it to children. And my grandson, his son, he struggles too. And it's so I don't know how do you explain to children about incarceration. If somebody can help me with that, I'd appreciate it.
Christina, is that something you may be able to touch on?
I was just sitting there thinking, and like, it's not something you can like just teach somebody, it's it is what it is. With me, I explained to my children what we were getting ready to go through and what the process might be, because I had no idea to myself. I had Googled it my first time. I was like, what's the process of this? But and just going off of what he was telling me. But I told them, this is going to be a different process. This is going to be different. Just do what they say, and I will be there. So if you need help, look at mama. And so we just kind of got through it. They got used to it. Now, like I said, my children were 7 and 10 when we started. And now my grandson, he's he's a pro at it though. He loves it. I think he kind of gets a kick out of it. He gets up there, gets sniffed by the dog, and gets on the machine, puts his head down, his hands out, and stands on the little footsteps and goes through the machine. And but yeah, it's not, I don't know. And of course, every child is going to be different. They're sensitive. They're, every child's emotions are different. So you kind of just gotta flow with it.
Yeah, I can relate, because when me and my husband met, my children were they were in teenage years, on the verge of graduating high school, right? So it's a lot of transitional stages in their lives happening. Of course, I mean, when they're that old or in that time of their life, they got a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah.
Like, what is it like? Because when I first met him, I went first, right? I took, and visited him on my own first.
Yeah.
With our first visits and first couple of visits. And then I would go home and explain to them that, you're going to be able to visit. This is what it's like, you can't wear this, you can't have this, you can't, and every facility is different, right? So you go one way at one facility, and then you go to they get transferred in the other, and then you seen women wear certain clothing, and the kids ask, "But I thought you can't wear that." And I'm like,
And even at that facility, it just depends on who's working. The rules always change week to week.
Right. And I'm like, just stick with what you know. You wear a certain jeans, certain shirt, you're good. I know when my husband was in Lawrenceville, we couldn't wear jeans. We couldn't have nothing denim on for the longest time. And he was at Lawrenceville for a good little while. Even though they didn't wear denim in the visiting rooms. I call them the potato sack, because that's what it looks like, the tan little things that they zip up in the back. I always joked with them, I'm like, you look cute in your potato sack today, just try to make it fun. But now I got a grandson, right? That's 4. And you laugh to not cry. And a lot of the stuff these little kids say. And he doesn't quite understand, where Pops is. He just sees it as Pop's house. We pull up and he's like, "Hey, Omi, we're at Pop's house. Yay, I get to go see Pops." And and he doesn't connect the dots. He doesn't connect going in to check in, and he has to stand there and let them do the wand. And at the time he was still potty training, and he's got to get on a table while I undress him and change him in front of this strange person he doesn't know. And he's scared and he's crying, and it's, and it's hard to explain it to a child at that age, right? We're not going to be
Wait, you had to take his diaper off?
Yes.
Oh yeah. And they make you put on a diaper of theirs.
From theirs. Yep.
Yep.
You literally have to undress your child or your grandchild in front of a CO. Mm-hmm. They don't touch them. They don't touch them. They just stand in the doorway, and you do everything.
And watch you.
They have to check the diaper. You have to, because people will smuggle things in the baby diaper. So
get that, but that's why they use the wand and the X-ray machine.
If it's not, they can't X-ray a child. They can't send a child when they're a certain age through the X-ray machine. But the wand is not going to pick up on anything that is like not metal, really.
What age? Because I remember carrying my grandchild through I had to hold him, and we both went through it at the same time.
Yep, they
when
will
he was
put
younger.
my grandson through. They're like, we're not putting him through, and he's been going since he was 3. He's 4 now.
He's been going since he was born, and I had to hold him in my arms and go through the machine.
So that's dangerous because of that radiation.
I've always had the children had to take their diaper. I had to take the diaper off my grandchildren, and then they put I put on their diaper. I never took them through the machine.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. Nope.
Yeah. They've always made me, like when he was younger, we had to literally hold him and go through the machine with him in our arms until he could stand up on his own. Then he did it on his own.
Wow. Yeah, they won't. Because I even asked when I first took him the very first time, and I believe that was at Buckingham, when he was at Buckingham. And I asked, what do I do? Hold him? They were like, nope, we're not going to put him through the X-ray machine. And the X-ray machine is not good for children.
I knew I should have thought that.
Yeah. So, because it is exposing them
It
to
is.
some radiation.
Yeah, that's a lot of radiation.
I mean, it's just like pregnant women. They're not going to put a pregnant woman through the X-ray machine. So, but yeah, and so it in a sense, you can't really explain to a child how it's going to be. You just have to be their support when you go through that process, and like, it's okay. Like Christina, you said, you feel uncomfortable. Look at me. Find that safe place within this room of people you don't know and going through the stuff that you have to go through. But, I mean, when I remember my grandson, he was screaming on top of his lungs because I had to change him. The only thing I could do at that point was pick him up after I'm done and just hold him and walk with him in my arms out, but
find some way to make him laugh.
Yeah. But as soon as he seen Pop, he forgot all about that. So, but it's hard. It's hard to try to explain to them. When they're older, it's easier to have that conversation, but when they're younger, it's hard. But like Christina said, every child is different. The way they process it, their sensitivity to it, it's difficult. It's difficult to really sit down and have that conversation. I was blessed with kids that, if mom's doing it, it's okay. That's their thought process. If mom's going through it and she handling it, I'm with her. I'm okay. So
thank God.
And what about you, Keira, as a child? Like, you touched on it with your dad, but how was that relationship and visits and your kind of, how did you feel towards him?
It was awkward, right? So I was like 11, as I mentioned before, first time that I met my dad, and which was in a visitation room, because later I learned that he and my mother split ways when she was pregnant with me, and so he was in the street life, and it was prison before I met him. But I just remember like visitation just being just awkward for so many different reasons, because here I am having to get to know my father and try to establish this bond with him in the physical since, like, face to face, which is so much different than over the phone or through letters. But while I'm surrounded by all these people in a visitation room, right? So you have all these other families sitting around, multiple conversations going on, all of these correctional officers. And my father, like I mentioned earlier, first visit, we were in Beckley, West Virginia. Like, again, you might as well be at Wallingridge. And I say that because I'm from Big Stone Gap, Virginia. So I know firsthand what that experience is like. So, and you are in a facility with correctional officers who have not been subjected to any type of diversity their entire life. They're not familiar with other cultures. They are very narrow-minded in their thinking. And it just made for an uncomfortable situation. And that was just the first initial couple of visits. As time went on and he got transferred to different facilities that were closer to larger cities, and there was more cultural diversity amongst staff. Everybody wasn't Caucasian. The whole energy shifted. The vibe was different, so to speak. And you felt like you could kind of let your hair down and, open up and enjoy it more. But it was still just a process. I remember going through the same machines that you're talking about, at 11 years old. And my grandmother's trying to explain to me like what we were to expect as we're going through these machines. And even sometimes driving hours away to visit, and then somebody having on jeans that a correctional officer just doesn't like for the day. So you're getting turned away from the visit after you drove hours to get there. Sometimes, depending on who was working, back to what we mentioned earlier, because the rules don't always apply across the board, you might be able to leave and run down the street to the dollar store and grab something that they deem appropriate and get back in time. But that wasn't always guaranteed. So just watching people have to go through that, like, it's already traumatic enough to have to be in here and visit your loved one this way. But then to have to deal with some of the things that you experience from the COs, because they'll treat you just like you're in prison as well. They stigmatize you along with, your family member, your loved one. So yeah, it was quite the experience.
Yeah.
Very difficult.
There's a question here. Sarah, do you have, and this can go to everyone in this, not just Sarah, but do you have conversations with your grandson and photos that you talk to him about at home? And does that help him stay connected? Like, when you're not going and visiting, how do you help him stay connected with his grandfather?
There's not one place in this house he can't look that he doesn't see Pops. I have probably 7 to 8, 10 photos in my bedroom. I have photos all along my an entertainment stand, on the cabinet that's on along the wall in my living room. I mean, there's not one room, honestly, that he cannot go in my house he does not see a photo of his Pops. And when he was first born, he didn't get to go and see his Pops, but I would, Vega would always, when he was an infant, let me just say hi to, calls him Little Mac. That's not his name, but he called him Little Mac. He's like, let me just say hi to him, and so that the voice was familiar, right? And then as he grew older and would be able to sit and look at things, we would put him, even though we will always put him in video visits, right? Even if, as a newborn infant. As he got older, he started looking and he started like saying, seeing Pops and seeing his face for the first time on video and stuff like that. So there was ways that I always introduced him to Pops. And then it just, I still remember the first day he met his Pops in person. It was Easter weekend last year. And we were, he would go through the whole process and he's standing there, and then Vega pops out from the door and he turns and he looks and he just yells, "Pops!" Like he's been around him his whole entire life, and runs up to him, jumps up on him, and wraps his arms around him, gives him the biggest hug. You would have thought that boy had spent from birth on up to that day with him. But that's how I introduced Pops into our grandson's life, just making it an important thing to hearing his voice over the phone, to showing him pictures, and and then eventually when he was old enough to for me to take him in there to handle without mama, I took him in and did the visits, so definitely a way to introduce him to that.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Christina? How do you when like there's no sort of visits or whatever, how do you keep the kids kind of connected with him?
Well, from day one, even with my children, we live every day like he's home. He calls 2, 3, 4, 5 times a day. We do video visits. Well, we used to do video visits more than we do now, but I work a lot more now. So now we do video visits on Wednesdays and Saturdays. But as far as my grandson goes, pictures everywhere, just like Sarah, he calls throughout the day, every day. With the PRS and the write-up program, as Sarah knows, we only get visitation on graduation days. And my husband has been there almost 2 years now. And we only get visitation on graduation. And my grandson has not seen his papa in almost, that's like 2.5 years. So May 9th is another graduation. Are you going, Sarah? Are you able to attend?
Sarah's
I
husband
didn't think huh?
Sarah's husband is in there. I think you're getting it mixed with the people I know in there, Christina.
I'm sorry. I thought Sarah's husband was in write-up program.
No.
Oh, okay. Where's your okay. Who's in write-up program?
I have people in the write-up program.
Yeah.
Okay. My apologies. All right. Yeah, I totally thought Sarah's husband husband was in the write-up program. All right, well, I take that back. Anyway, on May 9th, we have a graduation, and Jackson is going to go with me to see his papa.
Oh.
So that's going to be exciting. I can't wait.
Nice. Sonia, how do you make sure that you're maintaining that sort of relevance for him?
My Hassan has been in his children's life since day one. They don't live in the same city I live in, so I don't see my grandchildren, and we communicate now. They're, like I said, they're adults, so they do video visits. When they were growing up, when they were younger, we would take them on trips, talk to them, we celebrate holidays with them, and take them to visit their dad. But now they do video visits. Hassan financially takes care of them the best he can when he's working with those little pennies that they give him at the institution. So they have a great relationship. At least with he has a great relationship at least with 2 of his children, and the other 2 not so much. But that's because they have that resentment. But they're adults now, so I don't really have to do much. They know their dad. They know he's a good guy, who made a bad decision. So, it's all good.
What about you, Keira? Do you remember sort of how? I mean, I know that you said your mother and your father were separated when your dad went to prison. Did that mean that your mom kind of didn't talk about him in the home?
No, not at all. So, and when I say not at all, that wasn't the case. So, and this is one thing that I applaud my mom for, and we talked about a lot as I got older. When I was growing up, although I later learned my mom could have, rightfully so, said very bad things about my father, in their past. My mom never said a negative word to me and my brother about my dad, ever, ever. For years, she just would withhold her personal feelings towards him. She never shared with us any of, the stories about their past. It was as I probably got into my teenage years and being around, some of your messy aunts or cousins or other people in the family who would, find that opportune time to say, well, your dad did this, or, your dad was this person or that
Mhm.
person. But my mother held my father down, and as far as his name and his reputation, and she never said anything foul to us about my dad. And then, we also have to realize that when we do that, and I can say this from the child's perspective, we're already going through so much by our parents being incarcerated. And there's even a phase that you go through as a child. I know I did, and I've talked with many others that have, that you almost feel like it's your fault. So if you have a parent that is bashing, your father or mother or whoever is incarcerated on top of that, you're only really affecting the child at the end of the day, But I have to applaud my mom. And even after, and I'll share this really quick too, because she just, blows my mind every day. She's just such a forgiving and genuine person. When my father was diagnosed with cancer, my mom dropped everything she was doing to be by this man's side and take care of him until the day he passed away. She was the one holding his hand when he died. Yeah.
She sounds very selfless.
Very much so.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you. Um, I guess that kind of extends for me as well. Like with a child where the father and I, like, he's not incarcerated, but it comes down to that whole, like, it's still their father or their mother or their grandfather or their uncle, and so you are only really hurting the child, because that's really the only father or mother that they know. They don't have another one. And so when dad's not around to protect himself or defend himself, the only person that's really copping the brunt of all the bad things that you say about dad is the child. And I think that's hard. I had a question. There has been some questions come through, but I don't want to spend too long on this, and so we'll come back to them. I had a question, whether anyone has any experience with judgment in school or childhood peer environments. So like other kids, when they find out that dad or grandpa is incarcerated.
Yeah, I went through that as a child. And I think it was more so, not all, but a lot of it had to do with where I grew up. Being from rural Virginia, being from small town Virginia. As I mentioned earlier, I'm from Big Stone Gap, and I know a lot of people only know where that's at because the Wallingridge is notorious correctional facility within the state of Virginia. But being in that area, it wasn't as common when I was coming up in the late 80s, early 90s to hear that, someone's parent was incarcerated. So that was kind of something that I didn't share openly. But when kids would find out about it, it would be like, well, I heard, your dad done this, or my dad was always the murderer. Now, my dad was definitely the drug dealer, right? And even if he did, right? But they would always, it was like they were painting him to be this monster and almost shaming me because he was my father. So, and again, so kids just go through so many different things from different angles to, just school and the community, things that they're hearing behind closed doors in their family. And it just really takes a toll. It takes a toll on you as a child. My brother probably went through more than me. He was a little bit older, understood more. being a son without a father um, was very difficult for him. So yeah, you go through some stuff. But again, now, unfortunately, incarceration is more common now than ever. And there's like, I think you mentioned the other night when we were talking, like 1 in 3 people are affected by incarceration. So now people are talking about it more openly, and it's not as stigmatized as it used to be. So the culture is very different. But growing up in, like I said, the late 80s, early 90s, that was not the case at all for us.
I think to me, that kind of says, like, if you're not directly impacted, like, raise your children to be kind. Like, kids are cruel at the best of times. They will tease you about the most little things you could have, like a little piece of fluff on your hair, and you'll be the fluff girl for 3 years, right? And so I think, like my son, we've had people close to us in prison. And obviously with what I do, like a lot of the people I advocate for, they'll be like, I might be on Bluetooth and a call comes through and my son will be like, hey, how are you? What's your name? What did you do today? It's very, very normal for him. And I remember him just going to school and just sharing with people, like, this is what my mum does. And these are the people that he advocates for. And it was just so normal. And he would not accept a bad word. Like, it was just like, you are not going to say anything bad. He has TikTok now. And I went on his TikTok the other day and he's posted the live screenshot from the live we had with Hassan and Dante. And he's put it on there. He's like, free my guys.
Oh,
I'm like, sir.
awesome.
Really? So I think it's just raising your children to have compassion for, not all families look the same. And we're seeing that even more now, even just outside of incarceration, all families look different. You have families where parents are deployed. You have families where it's same-sex parents. You have families where one's passed, or maybe they live in separate homes. And so whatever that looks like is okay. But it's up to us as parents to raise children that, if you have questions, ask them respectfully.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I think we had a question here, and I will then move on. There was a question here that said, so in terms of visitation, how do you explain that not everyone in prison is bad? Like, society tries to portray them to help open their minds. What kind of conversations are you having with kids in your life to explain, I guess, especially Christina and Sarah and Sonia, when we hear the word murder or homicide, like, that's a lot, right? Like, it is what it is. It's murder. It's a life. How do you have those conversations with a child to explain that, when we walk into a visitation room and there might be 10 men in there, that just because society says that these men should be feared, that you don't need to be afraid necessarily?
I guess I'll start. Like with mine, I pretty much just took from what was going on with society, and like maybe things that were going on at school, and especially the school shootings. There was a lot going on at one point in time, and with them, I was just like, people make bad decisions. And also with my son, he had a raw choice of friends at one point. And I was like, son, what happens, because there was an incident where these children went out and they vandalized someone's property. And I was like, okay, so what if you were to get caught for that? You're going to be in trouble with the law. The police are going to come. You're going to be charged. You're going to have a charge on your record as a juvenile. And I was like, it all boils down to the choices you make. And unfortunately, well,
it is what it is. But the people that you surround yourself with, because your life can flip in a quick instance. I mean, it's for my husband, it was just a snap of a finger.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, it's pretty much the same with me as well. You know, I try to raise my children in the aspect of you shouldn't try to judge anybody until you get to know them. Like, you know their story, ask questions. And it was great that my husband was really, really open for them. Because he would, you know, when they first visit him in person, I mean, he talked to him over the phone, of course, but when he first visited him, when they first went to visit with me, he was like, ask me anything. And they're like, are you sure we could ask you anything? He's like, yeah, ask me anything and I answer you honestly. And they were like, what did you do? And he told them, you know, he's like, you know, it was the biggest mistake of my life. And it altered so many lives, you know. And they asked some hard questions. I was really shocked, but being open with them about things to me is, you know, as transparent as you can be is the best way to go with children. Because there's no like bigger feeling of a letdown than to go through your life thinking one thing and then as an adult it comes up that it wasn't that. It was completely different. They just told you this because at the time you were too young to understand.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I just lived a whole life. What in the world? You know, so we try to be as transparent as possible when it comes to that. And then when they're there, they see that these other families, they're all over there like their family, you know, they're laughing, they're joking, they're having fun, they're playing cards, they're playing games, you know, well, when that we could do that. But it's really just being really honest with the children, you know. I've even, you know, had those hard conversations with them. So I never hid anything from them, what he was charged with, how long he had, what age he was in there when he committed the crime. You know, they asked if he was sorry, you know, and he explained that the remorse level of it. Like, I live with that decision every single day of my life. I live with what I took away from the victim's family, but not only them, from my own mother. And that's the burden I am the only one to bear to carry, right? Because it was his decision. So being transparent as much as you can, letting them ask questions. Don't shun children away because they're asking questions. And have those hard conversations with them. It's better that they know and understand now what you're going through than later on in their years, if there's anybody out there with younger kids.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to move on to the next section because we are already at 2 hours, guys, and we are like pushing these topics. So the next one that we wanted to get through is shame, judgment, the way people treat you once they know that someone you love is incarcerated. Do you want to go ahead, Sarah? Or did you feel the pressure to keep quiet, or did friends fall away? Did you find unexpected support in places you didn't realize? And how did you find spaces where you could be honest about experiences without fear of judgment? Keira, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I touched on this earlier as it relates to what it's like being a child and having a parent that's incarcerated. But I'll move forward to what it was like for me transitioning out of incarceration and the stigma that came along with, oh, she was locked up, oh, she gave birth to her child while she was incarcerated, right? And then again, back to, and I hate to harp on my little town because Don't get it twisted. I am proud of where I'm from. It's very misunderstood. And I wish people got to experience a side of Southwest Virginia that they often don't get to experience. But I promise we are much bigger than Wallens Ridge and Red Onion. I promise. We are. And there are many, not as many, but there are Black and brown people from that community. They're very rooted in the community, and make the town and what it is. But I think a lot of that stigma came from being from that small area, back to being in an environment where it wasn't as common. Now, moving forward to that was the piece when I was younger. Not so much when I came out. Our federal case, the indictment that I was on, was probably one of the biggest things that had happened in the area. And unfortunately, it tore apart a whole neighborhood, a whole group of us that grew up together, 20 some of us. So it was like the talk of the town, right? When the police force took us down, they received a substantial amount of grant funding, new police cars, and all of these big rewards for their hard work. So coming out and having to, when you're in a small town and in a small community, you can't really avoid people. You're going to run into them, right? You're going to have to face those people sooner or later. So I didn't talk openly a lot about my experience being incarcerated and what it was like for me transitioning when I first came home. And I came home in 2014, where, people weren't really talking openly about second chances. There wasn't 15,000 organizations in the state of Virginia helping with reentry and recovery and, incarceration. Like this wasn't happening. There wasn't all of these criminal justice reform advocates. That it just was not happening. So it took me a while to find my footing and get past the shame associated with being incarcerated, and to understand that instead of seeing my record and my past, it's my resilience and it's my testimony and it's part of my story. And people need to hear this. It could help someone get through the struggle that they're going through. So it did take me a while, even being a confident person. It still was something that I didn't just get out here and like broadcast, hey, I'm a returning citizen and, here's what I'm going through. I still remember the uncomfortable part of having to explain your incarceration when you're applying for jobs and applying for housing and all of those hoops and obstacles that I had to go through. So it was a process. It was. But you have to take back your power. Like, your story is your story and it's for no one else to own. And I believe that there is a difference between being transparent and just telling all your business. Like, there's a line there, right? But there's just, again, so much power in sharing these pieces with people, because you never know who you're going to affect. This is honestly, even all of the community work and things that I've done, this is the first platform that I've ever been on publicly that I've talked about what it was like for me giving birth to my child while I was incarcerated. So this is my first time, even through all the advocacy work and stuff that I have done. So, and I can talk about, now that we're aware of ACEs, and like now, like I said, again, unfortunately, that incarceration is so common. Like, I can put the pieces together of my family and I can see where things went wrong and I can see why they went wrong, and that I can forgive, right? And I can heal from those things and just keep moving forward. And that's why it's so important for me to be an advocate, because I'm being that person that I needed when I was going through the same things. And so that's why when I'm listening to these stories and I'm hearing these tears, and I've got grown men on the phone with me crying and breaking down and trying to find a way to forgive themselves for some of the things that they did, like, I just reminded myself of, like, wow, like, I needed that when I was going through incarceration. I'm glad I can be that person. I'm glad that God has gifted me with the ability to do that. So I don't wear it like a badge of honor, but I definitely don't have any shame that I'm carrying with it anymore.
Good. Sonia, what about you? How easy do you find it to share with people that your son's incarcerated, and do you feel any shame or judgment?
Definitely feel shame. As a mother, you would never want to think that your child would be convicted of, and really, till recently, I couldn't even say first degree murder. I couldn't say it. So this platform and you have allowed me to release that. You see, so the shame, yeah, definitely shame. And talking about um my son and his journey, I don't do that. This is it, right? I I just don't talk about it. But if people ask me, I shut it down a little bit because I don't want to cry. I don't want you to, and I don't want you to judge me. I don't want you to, I just don't want that. So I thank you for allowing me to first, to say that. But definitely shame, thinking as a mother, what did I do? How did I cause this? I took myself through all of that. But I realize now that I was the best mom that I could be, that I knew how to be. And no, I'm not gonna be ashamed that, because the only way that I can get him where he needs to be is to talk about it. And the only way I'm gonna get me where I need to be is to talk about it. I can't hold it in, because my body will start to attack itself. Just
Yep.
holding all in. So the shame is gone, and I thank you for allowing me to talk about it.
You're so welcome. Thank you for sharing. Christina, what about you? I know that you're very present in this advocacy space, and so you're probably a little more in the same camp as Kira, but has it always been like that? Have you always been very comfortable to come forward and say, I know that we spoke beforehand about some of your family relationships, if you're happy to talk about them and how they were impacted?
Yeah, no, definitely. At the beginning, it was not easy for me to talk about it, especially his crime or his sentence, because immediately when you say he got life without parole, oh, they're like, oh, well, he killed somebody. Um, but yeah, I've lost family members, cousins, aunts, uncles. I even thought I lost my mother at one point, but she's came around, and she knew how much I loved David when I was 16. Um, but she also knew him at that age as well. She didn't like him at the beginning, but he grew on her. But yeah, no, it was definitely difficult at the beginning. But as I continued my advocacy work, and just spoke more about it, and just not explaining myself or explaining him or his situation or this situation, but just, making people see him for who he is.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier now. And well, yeah, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Sarah, what about you? How do you? I know you're kind of like me, and I guess I'll share that after. But I'm sure it's not always like that. Like, do you pick and choose who you share? Vega's crime with the Vega's incarcerated. Like, do you feel shame or discomfort?
So for me, when I first met Vega, it was hard because I didn't have nobody really around me other than my in-laws that knew what it was like. I didn't know about support groups. I didn't know about any of that. So, people would ask, "Oh, you're engaged. Where's your man out? Where's your fiance?" And at that time I would just make up whatever I could come to mind, because reading reading who they are and the way they ask certain things, it's like I don't even want to go in that conversation with you. I don't want to put myself in this position to talk to you about it, but as time went on, and I got comfortable sharing his story, which became our story, I didn't have no shame because I love who I love.
That's right.
And it's no shame in who I love.
That's
So
right.
I just made it a vow of mine that I was going to be his voice. In order to be his voice, I could not have shame. I could not feel like I was going to be judged. People are going to judge me regardless. People are going to have their opinions regardless of what I'm doing. Whether if I'm doing good for the community, somebody's going to always have an opinion about what I'm doing. So to me, it's just like, I don't care. I don't care what people think about me, and that I am married to somebody who is incarcerated for murder, and that may sound like so like heartless, but at the same sense is I know who my husband is. I know the burden he carries. I know the remorse. I know how difficult it was for him as a teenager going through that life and then transitioning into the adult, into the man he is today, and the help he provides to people in there, the guidance he provides. I have individuals coming on the phone with me and saying, hey, I don't want to take up much of your time, but I just met your husband a couple hours ago and I need to tell you this. He sat down with me, and I was going through a mental health crisis, and he took the time out to talk to me. He took the time out to help me and give me a different perspective. And I'm forever grateful, because you don't see people like that. You don't come across people like that in here. It's hard. So I know who my husband is, and I'm always going to tell his story, and I'm always going to tell other people's stories because they need a voice.
Yeah. I was going to share before we move on as well. I think for me, my little backstory through my advocacy was I was married to someone incarcerated. They came home and it didn't go great. And towards the end of that, I lost a child. I lost a pregnancy. And I sat on the phone sobbing myself to sleep. And the only people that were there were people in prison. They were the men and women in prison that were on the phone to me, helping me through my loss and my grief. And they didn't have to. It was like, you have been there for us, and so we want to be there for you. And like, they didn't even say anything. They were just sitting there hearing me cry for this loss of life. And so for me, I will tell anyone who will listen that some of the most beautiful people I've ever met in my life are behind those walls, and there is no shame. And I will tell anyone who uses the word inmate or prisoner, or I'm like, he has a name. She is someone's child. She is someone's mother. Just because she is there and you are here, the only difference between you and them is luck. It is luck, because I am not perfect. I am not perfect. I have done bad things to many people, and prison is the punishment, right? Mm-hmm. That is the punishment. Going to prison and losing liberty is the punishment, and everything else that comes with it is a consequential consequence that comes along that shouldn't be part of that. The defranchisement that comes afterwards, the stigma, the looks, the judgment, those are all extra things. So, the judge and jury already handed down their sentence. It's not up to us to be the judge and jury as well. That's above our pay grade, right? So I think it's really key is that we need to be making sure that not everyone is going to see it the way we do, but we have to speak for them and make sure that people know the wonderful things about them, not just the things that they've done. Because it's not like we all walk around and be like, well, when I was 12, I stole a bag of burger rings from the Target. You know, like we've all done things. We don't walk around with a badge of honor showing it though, you know, and either should they. Kira, something specifically for you, I think, because you've kind of gone through this. You've lived through re-entry. So coming home, starting over, and working to rebuild trust and connection with your family.
Kira, what was that process like for you? What surprised you? What challenged you? What helped you find your way back into your relationship with those you love?
Well, I came home determined to break the cycle, and I mentioned that earlier. And my main motivation was my child. So I had, the daughter that I gave birth to behind bars, and I had to step back into mommyhood immediately. My mom, of course, knows me and knew that I was very capable of taking care of my child. So the day that I was released from the halfway house, she was like, okay, it's your turn now, sis, and just kind of like, here you go. Coming home, I transitioned into my mom's house, and I was there for a couple of months before I went out on my own. So for me, it was like, I'm a mom now, and that reality just hit me. And so I didn't have time to really pity myself or harp on my past mistakes. I had to hit the ground running and make it happen. As mothers, we just have that grit in us. The majority of us have that grit in us that we know if we don't make it happen, it's not going to happen. Right. And so that was really what kind of fueled me. And I'm a go-getter by nature. I've always been a hustler, whether I was doing the right thing or the wrong thing. It's just who I am. So that self-determination helped a lot. For me, reentry, it isn't about just like walking out of prison. It's about walking into a world that counted you out and deciding to rebuild it anyway. So and you have to have that kind of mindset in order to make it. I was fortunate enough, and I've seen people on both sides of the spectrum to have a supportive family. And I've seen people who came out that don't have a supportive family, guys who are transitioning into shelters because there are no reentry homes in the city that they are supposed to go to. Or we had someone reach out to us last night. This guy is a couple of days or a couple of weeks out, and he slept on the street the last 2 nights. And I'm like, what are we doing here? Right? This is where we create a repetitive cycle in the system to just like funnel people back into the cycle of prison. But just for me, again, letting my daughter and my determination to just make it be my fuel, having a support system, already having had some experience in the adult world, working, going to school, having that under my belt. When I came out, I went back into working right away. I was able to get a job. It wasn't the best, but with a felony conviction, you were limited, especially where I was at. I eventually went back to school about a year later. Then I went on to get my bachelor's degree. I went on to found a nonprofit organization when I was in Northeast Tennessee. And then there's just been so many things that I've accomplished since then. And so one of the most recent projects that we have launched is Reentry and Recovery Alliance. And I think, Kirsten, you dropped the link to that in the chat to share. So I'm in the Western Tidewater area now in the city of Suffolk. So we are in the process of establishing reentry and recovery housing here in Western Tidewater. Outside of the advocacy work, it's like, okay, well, I looked at it from this perspective. It's like, I can help get you to the door as an advocate. I've even been, blessed enough to be able to help get people through the gate. But what can I get you when I get you out here? How can I be that bridge, right? The bridge between incarceration and transitioning. And so that's what we're in the process of doing now, and taking that from the lived experiences. Like, what challenges did I face when I was reentering, going through, like applying for jobs and trying to get housing and some of those situations. So we've created a program to help bridge that gap and give guys some of that transition time that they need. And I'm just going to add this too, because sometimes it's not always healthy for some of these women and men to return to their family again. Even if you have a good support system, sometimes think about, and I even think about myself, coming straight from incarceration, straight to a fully functioning family where so many different dynamics are going on. You have so many people in the household and schedules and all these things. That can be quite overwhelming, especially for someone who's been down for years or decades. So we're hoping to be that piece to assist people. And again, like, we built this program. When I say we, myself and Sam Harris co-founded it, and Sam had been incarcerated almost 25 years before he was released by way of conditional pardon in July of last year. So just taking our own personal challenges and building a program to help assist others, and just bridge that gap.
Yeah, most definitely.
Absolutely. I guess one of the hardest parts is knowing that these impacts don't stop with us, right? It's like, we can wear the stress and the financial burden and everything we've spoken about tonight, but they do ripple into the next generation. So, Sarah, is there anything that you wanted to specifically ask about that?
Yeah. So what have you seen in your own family or in others about how this trauma passes down? How do we break that cycle?
Sonia, do you want to start?
I don't know. I don't know. How do we? I really don't know. We're struggling with a little bit of that right now, with Hassan's son falling into the wrong crowd. I don't know. It's the I don't have the answer for that. I'll let someone help me with that.
Yeah. Christina, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say, teach them from experience, put it on the forefront, make sure they see, they understand, they know how it all falls into place, consequences, everything.
Yeah. Keira?
I would agree with what Christina said. And just to add to that, so I have a 13-year-old now, right? And just coming into the realization of my incarceration, and her dad is incarcerated. He's currently doing a 10-year sentence in federal prison. And so when we have open dialogue about substance use, incarceration, and the effects of it, I don't glorify it by any means. And I give my daughter the real, especially her realizing, hey, well, they'll send a pregnant woman to prison. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're a woman. It doesn't matter if you're pregnant. It doesn't matter if you got 10 kids. None of that matters. Yeah. And you just got to be real with these kids. And I'll even look at my daughter sometimes. I'll be like, girl, you wouldn't make it in prison, right? Because they don't have X, Y, and Z in there. And I promise they don't care if you see mommy, if you get a phone call. You got to be just raw and honest with these kids, because we're growing up, or these kids are growing up in an era of instant gratification and, things happening at the click of a button and not knowing how to be patient. And I'm like, could you imagine being incarcerated and not getting to see your family but once a month or once every 6 months, right, and just having to wait for somebody to tell you when to take a shower, when to eat, and so when you're telling them this and you're not glorifying it, you're not laughing about it, and you're making sure that you remind them of how it set you back in life, how far ahead that I would be had I not, went through and had to face some of these challenges. Just honesty, having conversation. I know one of the most impactful conversations that my daughter had, because she dealt with a lot, because prior to her dad's incarceration, he was absent due to his addiction. And she went through that phase of thinking that something was wrong with her, like, why me? And then me having to explain it to her from the perspective of, I made a lot of same decisions that your father made. I'm just fortunate enough that my story didn't turn out the way that his did. And just like my mother, I don't say anything harmful or hurtful about her dad to her. But one of the most, I guess, impactful relationships that she had is another little girl that she became friends with, that she was able to open up to about her dad. And this is the first time. And come to find out, this little girl lost her father to an overdose as a baby, and never really got to know her dad. And then, so there's certain things that we can do for our children as parents and grandparents, but kids being able to have these conversations amongst each other. And so I always make sure that, when her and her friends are around, I create a safe space for them to talk openly about things. And they're very comfortable. Sometimes I'm like, oh God, they're too comfortable. But I want to be part of those conversations, right? So I can help you make it make sense. Not so much project my opinion of things on you, but just to make sure that you're looking at things from different perspectives. And so I would just say, just keep it raw and honest with them.
I think we live in such a progressive community as well, that there are so many events and really positive, even child-focused things, like, Paul Taylor's doing, the League for Safer Streets, and does a bunch in the juvenile space. There is a lot of youth events where there are returning citizens having these conversations with these young boys and girls. And I think taking, especially our children that are impacted by the criminal justice system, to go and be around others, and then also have that valuable advice from people that have been through prison, and to say, this is not cool. If you keep going down, if you keep gangbanging, if you keep carrying a firearm, if you keep fighting, this is what's going to happen. And you may not be as lucky as me. You may never come home. They may not give you an out date. And not that shock value, because we know that the shock stuff doesn't work, but really giving them other positive things to put their time into. Rap music and the street culture is so glorified, and half of these rappers have never even been to prison, right? Or they've done a few days here and there in county jail, and they think they can rap about, bees and hoes, and like using a gun and how cool it is. And I think really just having those conversations, like I have a almost 13-year-old son, and I thank God every day that he is a little gamer and he doesn't want to leave the house, right? Because I'm like, I don't want you on the streets. I don't want you in those streets. I don't want you, hooliganing around in the middle of the night and being one of those children that I see with no shoes on, running down the street and crossing the road and not looking both ways before the car comes. And so I am definitely blessed in that aspect. But at the same time, I have conversations with him about, when you see this isn't reality. The way these rappers live is not reality. They just hit it big. The likelihood of you turning out like that is slim to none, sir. So you just stay on Fortnite and stay in your room and do your thing. All right. Like, I'm cool with that. Let us move on now, I guess, to the last section. And then we can go back and have a look at some of the questions that we've missed, or so on and so forth. So, and I think this really kind of ties up why we're all here tonight, and that's community. No one should have to feel like they're walking this road alone. It can feel very isolating. What has support looked like for you? And what do you want others to know about building or finding their village?
Now, whether it was like a friend, an organization, or someone who just sat with you in silence? What made the difference for you?
Christina, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can start. My number one is my mother-in-law. I don't know what I'd do without her. um, I know there's many that are not blessed with, the perfect mother-in-law relationship, but I am so blessed. She is my go-to. Also, like, my advocacy families. CFSY has been a huge part in our lives for many years now, for over a decade. And there's so many wonderful ladies out there that have started these groups, these support groups for different facilities, and they're safe places. And I think it's wonderful. And everybody needs somebody, somebody, even the toughest person.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Now that you've kind of shared that, I know that you have to go. So I want to thank you
Thank you.
for being so vulnerable, sharing with us, for coming on here and giving people, it's not just you having that space. There's people that's now being able to share and can now comfortably have these conversations and make
Yeah,
connections because
absolutely.
of the strength that you're giving them. And so this is not in vain. This isn't just to share yours and your husband's story, but it's so that other people can feel less alone. And I think there's so much power in that. And so I wanted to thank you so much for sharing and coming on tonight and really opening our eyes to your journey as well. So
No problem. I thank you guys for
thank you.
doing this, and so other people can see and know they're not alone. I mean,
Yeah.
I know everybody feels alone at some point, but
Yeah.
you're not alone.
Absolutely. Well,
And
you
thank
are
you.
excused from the table.
I gotta go get my
Good night,
daughter. I'm sorry.
Christina.
Thank you, Christina.
It's fine.
Thank you,
Good night.
ladies. Bye.
Y'all have a good night, and thank you.
Bye
Wow.
bye.
Keira, did you want to kind of talk next about the support network piece?
Okay. So, support for me coming home was my family. And I was blessed to have a supportive family and friends, a couple of close friends that were there for me. But I quickly, within a year or so, created that platform to be that support for other people. Again, this was back before there were a lot of organizations throughout the state that, were helping with reentry and returning citizens. So I just applaud, like, I'm always amazed at the state of Virginia. Growing up in the Commonwealth, I never seen this coming. You could have never convinced me 10 or 15 years that this would be the atmosphere throughout the state, that people would be openly talking about recovery and peer support specialists and reentry, and all of these organizations trying to fight for legislation and second chances. So it just warms my heart every time I see it. And just my words to anyone that's out there that's looking for a support system: do your research. I mean, you would be surprised how many little support groups are within your Facebook. When you see people like Kirsten and her organization, jump on her lives or get in the comments. You're going to meet people just like us every day that would be willing to be, a listening ear, a shoulder for you to lean on and talk about. And, if we don't have the resources that you need, I promise you we'll find them for you. That's just the type of people that we are. We're very resourceful people. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. But a
Sonia,
closed mouth doesn't get fed. So really quick, you have to reach out. You have to let someone know that you need that help.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. I agree. We're not mind readers at the same time, right? Like, we are more than happy to help, but the first step is saying, hey, I need some. And I know myself, I can only speak for me, but I am pretty sure that everyone here tonight, no one is ever going to feel bad for coming to me and saying, hey, I just need talk today. I just need help today. Whether, it's just been a bad day and you can't get in touch with your loved one and you just need someone to be like, that sucks, man. I'm sorry. Or maybe it's, I've helped people get food stamps. I've helped people find rides to visits. Like there is help out there, and there is no reason for you to suffer alone. There is enough isolation about this life, let alone us not coming together. You just have to find your people. Not everyone is going to be for you, and that is okay. But
Right.
find your people and hold them close, and build and foster that. Sonia, what about you? How do you find your sort of support networks and
So
what?
I have, my immediate family. They're great. My mother, oh my God, I don't know what I would do without her. She's my rider. We go visitation, everything. I talk to her. She's answered every phone call for her son, my daughter, my son, my other son. I have another son, and then I have I work in reentry, so we have transitional housing in Richmond and Henrico. So I have some friends that, man, they're awesome. They're a good group, and now I have y'all. So um I have some people that I can talk to when I need to talk to, and when I need to cry, they there for me, and they know my story. But it's a small group of people that know my story. But well, now I'm on this, so a lot of people.
Sorry.
what a way to come out, right?
Now the whole world knows it.
Yeah.
Yeah, my
Um,
mother. Without my mother, I don't know where I would be. She's my go-to.
yeah, I love that. Um, and I think that's it as well. Like, it doesn't have to be 100 people, right? It's not quality over quantity is key. Like you don't need, and who wants to be telling the story over and over again? Like, why do you want to be rehashing that trauma? Like, build those close bonds. You only have to tell the story once, and then you just feed that. And giving and taking, it is so important, and being that space for somebody else, and then being that space for you. But you don't have to go around and tell everyone. Like, obviously, in this environment, you've only had to say it once and 50,000 people have been able to see, but you don't want to be trying to reach out to a person every day and being like, so this is my son's story, da 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 da. No one wants to go through that. So yeah, like you really only need like a few solid people. That's all you need. What about you, Sarah? What's your support network like?
Um, kind of. I mean, I keep it small. I keep my circle small. Period. Even the network, support network I have, my mother-in-law gets a lot. I'll tell you that. She gets an earful all the time when I'm going through something, and my husband tells me all the time, he's like, I wanted y'all to be close, but I didn't think you was gonna get that close. Come on.
Man,
But
all of something else.
but we go, she's the same. She goes to visits with me. I mean, we do a lot of stuff together, outside of just the incarcerated world, right? But a lot of my people tell me I don't like to reach out a lot when I need the help. Like I will honestly suffer in silence and isolation, because I don't feel like I don't want to burden other people, because I feel other people are going through probably way worse stuff than me, you know. So I more so try to be there for everybody else and be their strength, and so I have to work on that a lot, with myself, with being open and reaching out when I need support, because I will withdraw from people. I'll tell people I'm fine, and I'll get off the phone and bawl my eyes out. I'm not fine, yelling at myself in the house. I'm not fine, but it's just, something I have to work on. But I've support groups on Facebook, meeting people, meeting you, Kirsten, from advocating, you know, and I'm honored to have met you, and just have you in my space, and now we have the ability to meet so many other women and men in this space that are driven to help people, and that becomes your support system, because like you said, they just understand. Some of them, like Kira, have lived both sides. Some of them, coming home, have family that you can talk to, and how did you deal with that? How did you prepare for it? How do you do this? How do you do that? So, but my kids, I live out away from everybody. My kids is like, why are you going to do that? Nobody's around you. You're going to be all alone. And I'm not alone. I'm not. They come out and visit. My mother-in-law, she comes and stays with me like we girlfriends. So I enjoy my, my peace and my space, but I love it, my support system as well, So
You and your mother-in-law are sick.
whatever.
How close you are, it's gross. It's gross. I'm just saying. In the nicest way possible. In the nicest way possible.
Yeah, we're just best friends. I don't know what to say.
I guess I want to kind of close off. I'm mindful that we've been here for 2.5 hours now. We've had an incredible amount of people come through, but I'm also mindful that you guys have things that you need to do tonight, and so do we. So to Christina, Keira, and Sonia, thank you again. Your courage and your presence and your truths tonight are nothing short of powerful. You've given so many people watching a mirror and a sense of belonging and a reminder that none of us are alone.
And to everyone watching, thank you for being a part of this. Whether you spoke up in the comments or just listened, you've held space with us. Please continue to reflect, reach out, and remember, healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens in a community.
Is there anything that either of you want to kind of share before we hop off for tonight?
Just thank you again for creating this platform and giving us a safe space to share and be a voice for the voiceless. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to say the same thing. Thank you for allowing me to have a voice tonight, to share, to cry, to laugh. I saw my mother in the comments, so that's my support system. I saw her commenting, so she was here too. Maybe next time she'll get up here and tell a little bit. But I thank you. I thank you.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Well, that is our next live, and it's our final one for April. We overindulged and did a live every week during April, and we have learnt. So our final live from April will be next week, Tuesday, April 29th at 7 p.m. And we will be talking about mental health and substance use. So that's a conversation that deeply intersects with the justice system, but touches countless lives outside of that. So mark your calendars and go and reply to the event.
Yes. And as always, keep sharing, keep loving, keep building. You are a part of this movement and you all matter.
So from all of us at Bridges Beyond Bars, thank you. Be well and good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.